Politicians Are Unwilling, and Eric B. Eyes blurry saying goodbye at the cemetery. I murder niggas on wax and forget where they buried. This the hardest shit since Rakim and Eric B. Or pistols on your album cover just like BDP. Single mothers on that EBT just trying to feed they seeds. Scammers and boosters living nice off of EDD. CCTV, all the cameras will shoot you. Soon as you let a shot off it and damage your future. It's some thugs in the hood that could have been hoopers. Some good girls who turned bad who could have been super models. Some Dominicanos in Cabo. Some with the bloodline, the Lagos, Legos. So many stones in my hand just like Thanos. Eat Italiano, grazie, prego. Vibe to my music out in Prague. FaceTime me and highs. It feel good to feel alive. Think I just had a breakthrough.
I know the light is bright, but keep on watching me. I know the light is bright, but keep on watching me. I'm stolen property, kicking the flavor to society.
Eyes blurry saying goodbye at the cemetery. I murder niggas on wax and forget where they buried. This the hardest shit since Rakim and Eric B. Or pistols on your album cover just like BDP. Man, it's the hardest shit since DPG, Corrupt and Daz. Nate Dogg on the hook, Dr. Dre on the track. This melody taking me back, but we pushing it forward. 187 on rappers, and yes, I'm a poet. At times I get confused, they lie in their interviews. Get goose pimples whenever I'm putting on my jewels. Bail so many brothers out, paid all their lawyer fees. After that, some turn they back, where is the loyalty? Money's lovely, but I could care less, who has more than me? I'm just happy Matula Shakur got free. May he rest in peace. He was a warrior all of his days. And time moves faster the more you get up there in age. And other news, I'm a G to the grave. I know they want to see me burnt out, depleted and drained. High blood pressure. Instead, I'm on a red page. My pupils are dilated. I throw in some dark shades. Eyes blurry saying goodbye at the cemetery. I murder niggas on wax and forget where they buried. This the hardest shit since Rakim and Eric B. Or pistols on your album cover just like BDP. I'm MC Shan with a Uzi. Pistols on your album cover just like BDP. To the hardest artists out there. Oh, pistols on your album cover. Boogie Down Productions. I remember I put Tupac on to that Henny. Howard University. Howard Homecoming DC. He's like, what's...
Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again. The progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back in the building. I know it's been a while. Please forgive me for being absent, but we're back once again, and we're going to have a great conversation this evening, I believe, on the second day of Pan-African History Month. Shout out to the OG, the great ancestor, the esteemed academic, none other than Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Make sure you put some respect on his name. We know there are a number of people who take umbrage with Black History Month. We know that we don't believe that you simply celebrate or learn your history, but you're in one month, but that we want to, of course, heighten the level of learning that takes place during the month of February, of course, Pan-African History Month. And so today, our show, we're going to be discussing why are politicians unwilling, keyword unwilling, to admit that America is a racist country. Before we get started, I'm going to invite a special guest this evening. I want to just make sure we go over the ground rules. If you're watching, make sure you tap in. The link is in the description. I will put the link in the chat as well. But here Lumumba Speaks, as we know, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. We have a couple of ground rules. One, diversity of thought is welcome. I don't care if you're radical, if you're conservative, you're right down the middle, if you're integrationist, if you're Pan-Africanist. There's all love here. We believe in diversity of thought. I believe that's how you truly learn. We want to make sure that we do not practice any, keyword, any racial epithets of any kind. Once again, facts over feelings. We want you to attack the argument, not the person. And of course, no fundamentally false statements. As I always state, an example of a fundamentally false statement would be Michael Jordan only won 2 championships. Now, you can have it be of the opinion that LeBron James is the GOAT, but if you were to make a claim that was patently false, I will shut you down. Of course, it's my platform and it's my reputation on the line here, so no fundamentally false statements. However, your opinion is welcome, but we want to make sure that you undergird your opinion for factual information. Also, our mission here at Lumumba Speaks is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to simply challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. So with that being said, I'm going to welcome the man, the myth, the legend, your favorite Pan-Africanist, and your favorite historian. Some people fancy me to be an historian, but this is my favorite historian, none other than Dwayne Omawale. How you doing today, brother?
Doing well.
Very good, very good. So I decided to do this show for a couple of reasons. One, Nikki Haley is in the news. As many of you may or may not know, Nikki Haley is the former governor of South Carolina. She's currently a Republican candidate for the president of the United States. She's running against Trump right now. Many people believe that the math shows the math isn't mathing and she will not be able to win the Republican candidacy, but she's marching forward anyway. But she made some news late. She was interviewed, I believe, on CNN. They were doing a town hall. She was asked a question if America was a racist country. So I'm going to play the clip, and then we're going to tap in regarding why, of course, we believe politicians are unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. Then, of course, once again, I'm going to put the link in the chat, family. If you all want to tap in and be part of the conversation, you are more than welcome to do that. But we're going to play this clip and then we're going to get to it. So give me one moment. Fair use, fair use, fair use, because of course I do not own or control the information I'm about to share. Okay. All right, here we go. Fair use, fair use, fair use.
Protections for the institution of slavery were written into the U.S. Constitution. The White House was built with slave labor. Your home state of South Carolina seceded from the Union, fought a war to defend the enslavement of Black people. I understand you don't think America is a racist country now, but we're here at a college. Do you really think as a historical matter, America has never been a racist country?
I mean, think about what you're saying. First of all, I will tell you, when you look at, the Declaration of Independence, it was that, men are created equal with unalienable rights, right? That was what we all knew. But what I look at it as is I was a brown girl that grew up in a small rural town. We had plenty of racism that we had to deal with. But my parents never said we lived in a racist country. And I'm so thankful they didn't. Because for every brown and Black child out there, if you tell them they live or were born in a racist country, you're immediately telling them they don't have a chance. And my parents would always say, you may have challenges. And yes, there will be people who are racist, but that doesn't define what you can do in this country. And so I think it's important that we tell all kids that, look, America is not perfect. We have our stains. We know that. But our goal should always be to make today better than yesterday. It's hugely important. And that's the problem I have, is we have too many people with this national self-loathing. It is killing our country. We have got to go back to loving America. We are blessed because that little brown girl in that small rural town in South Carolina, she grew up to become the first female minority governor in history. She then went on to be UN ambassador, and now she's running for president of the United States. I want every brown and Black child to see that and say, no, I don't live in a country that was formed on racism. I live in a country where they wanted all people to be equal and to make sure that they had life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, but just to push back a bit, because I was a history major in New Hampshire. You're talking about the ideals of America. But America was founded institutionally on many racist precepts, including slavery.
But when you look at said all men are created equal, I think the intent was to do the right thing. Now, did they have to go fix it along the way? Yes, but I don't think the intent was ever that we were going to be a racist country. The intent was everybody was going to be created equally. And as we went through time, they fixed the things that were not all men are created equal. They made sure women became equal too. All of these things happen over time. But I refuse to believe that the premise of when they formed our country was based on the fact that it was a racist country to start with. I refuse to believe that. I have to know in my heart and in everybody's heart that we live in the best country in the world, and we are a work in progress, and we've got a long way to go to fix all of our little kinks. But I truly believe our founding fathers had the best of intentions when they started, and we fixed it along the way, and we should always look at it that way.
Okay. The intent was to do the right thing. Once again, family, if you're watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube, having a great conversation regarding why are politicians unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. The link is in the chat if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation. But Dwayne, the intent according to Governor Haley, was to do the right thing. As a historian, do you believe that that statement is historically accurate?
It's not, and I mean, I'm struggling to even understand the logic behind it, because if the intent is to do the right thing, why wasn't the right thing done initially? Because she made the point, America had to keep coming back and fixing things. But my thing is, if my intent is to create a non-racist country, then I would have just created a non-racist country. I wouldn't have left any work for future generations to have to come back and fix anything.
Great point. Great point. Great point. So she said a number of things. She talked about little brown girl. I think it's also important to discuss that Governor Haley is white passing. Right? This is a reality. You wouldn't know she was Indian unless she told you.
I wouldn't have known. Yeah.
So this is something to be considered, or to be cognizant of when we're having this conversation. But she talks about, and she talked about this even when she was on the Breakfast Club, this concept of if you teach children about racism, then somehow they would believe that they can accomplish something, which is absolutely nonsensical. When Charlemagne the God stated, well, you tell your child that it's cold outside. That doesn't mean they can't go outside and play. They're going to put a coat on. Right? So, many would argue that this is all about having a care concern about how white people feel, this concept of white fragility. And of course, I've experienced this in my work, to where you may be discussing a history of racism in America, or just globally, and you're told, hey, you should couch your words because it makes white people feel a certain way. Right. So this concept of promoting how white people feel as more important than what's in your best interest as a person of color, or of course for here as African people, as Black people. So something to just be cognizant of. But the intent was to do the right thing. She also talked about, little brown girl, small town South Carolina, grows up to become governor. Michelle Alexander, in her book, The New Jim Crow, talks about that this is oftentimes a talking point used to promote this concept of, it's really rooted in exceptionalism, right? But it doesn't speak to the everyday experiences of the masses of people of color in America, in this country. So something to be cognizant of. But, when she talks about how, we was able to fix these issues, she didn't talk about how and why. She didn't talk about the fact that people lost their lives. She didn't talk about the fact people had to protest and fight for years and generations, right, as a result of this, right? She talked about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, who we all know Frederick Douglass stated was what? A pro-slavery document, right? So, it's like, well, what, she's looking at the country, I would argue, looking at history through a rose-colored lens. Why do you think she's doing that?
Because she's trying to be elected.
Right.
I mean, that's typically part of the politics, particularly on the national stage, that you'll notice many of the presidential candidates actually try to downplay the history of racism in America. One thing that stood out to me the last election cycle was Joe Biden. He made a similar attempt to do that when he made a statement about how Donald Trump was the first racist to ever be elected president of the United States. Obviously, we know from a historical perspective that's extremely false, but that's part of the process of going through the campaign. It's almost like you try to paint a rosier picture of America than what actually is the case. So typically that's done in two ways. From a contemporary perspective, it's to downplay the issues in the country, particularly racism in the country, to make it seem like, oh, we've made more progress in America than we actually have. And then from a historical perspective, that's typically to downplay the history of racism in America. And that's something I've observed for years now. That's part of the political process that politicians do, tend to downplay racism, contemporary racism, and historical racism.
Right. Absolutely. And then when we talk about the history, Ms. Mello, I'm late to the party. Which video did you show? I showed a video, Nikki Haley. She was speaking at a town hall event on CNN. We find this, and we look at the history of America, being founded, right? We all know there was a lot of pushback regarding the 1619 Project, right? I actually have the book behind me. So just to say, conventional wisdom, conventional logic, America was founded in 1776. Cool, no problem. Well, if we start at 1776, we know America was founded on two things: settler colonialism and the genocide of native peoples, indigenous peoples, and what? And chattel enslavement and dehumanization of African peoples. Sounds like racism to me, right? So, it's one of those situations where you say that once again, They're trying to be elected. But I think one of the issues that is more harmful is the fact that it teaches people that if you want to be successful in life, right, and success, we could put that in air quotes, you have to have a care concern regarding how white people think and feel. And in doing so, you are promoting and supporting white supremacy. Yeah, extremely problematic. So these are some of the issues, you know, and you've written about this extensively. I've written about it a little bit, right? About the two-party system in America and how, listen, you're looking at a wolf or a fox. The reality situation is you're still going to be bit. Both political parties are inherently racist. Not only racist, we even make the argument white supremacist in nature. Yes.
Yeah, and part of what I've noticed with this conversation as well, you know, the way that history is even discussed and dealt with. So, you know, we'll talk about the Declaration of Independence as, you know, the document exists independently of the men who wrote it.
Right.
You know, for example, you know, Thomas Jefferson, you know, one of the writers of, you know, the Declaration of Independence, I believe he actually wrote the first draft of that document. And when you go through his writings and the things he said about African people and even Native Americans, there was no question his views. He was, you know, an adamant white supremacist. He said white people were superior to Africans. And concerning Native Americans,
in every way, he said in every way.
Yeah, and concerning Native Americans, he openly called for the genocide against Native Americans. He believed that, you know, in the United States, he didn't see a United States where white people and Native Americans could coexist, and he advocated extermination as a way to deal with the Native American population. So that's part of it too. Then when we talk about the intent behind the foundation of America, the so-called founding fathers, they made it very clear what their intentions were. Their intentions were to create a nation that was a white settler state in which African people had no rights, you know, were slaves, and in which Native Americans just had to go.
Absolutely. And I think for you watching, if you're unfamiliar with the writings that he's speaking of, I believe that comes from Thomas Jefferson's memoir, Notes on the State of Virginia, right? And of course, we know, because we always clap back, as we like to say, Benjamin Banneker wrote a scathing letter to Thomas Jefferson refuting, right, and challenging his white supremacist view. So Notes on the State of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson. I actually have read the Notes on the State of Virginia. Once again, I'm a voracious reader, so I tend to read, of course, literature that I don't agree with. But yes, absolutely. So people, you know, it's really, it comes down to the sanitizing of history, right? Now, this is the theme, not only that has been prevalent throughout the history of American education, but something that's actually reoccurring, and we can even argue, we could look at the election of Donald Trump as a push to really, you know, try to sanitize and recreate, you know, a narrative regarding America and the history of America. And this reminds, I was doing some reading last night, actually, stayed up rather late, regarding in Germany, there were, you know, pockets of vestiges of the Nazi Party that sought to provide a rose-colored lens of the Nazi Party and what they were about, and try to sanitize the history of course, the Holocaust. So these things take place. Is something that we need to be cognizant of. But another thing with Nikki Haley, so, you know, Nikki Haley isn't her actual name, right? She actually has an Indian name, but she made it anglicized her name to be accepted by whites, right? I can recall when I was an undergrad, I took a class of sociology, social problems in a diverse society. And the book had talked about, that, you know, the myth that we're taught K through 12, and we know much of what we're taught K through 12 is propaganda, not actual education or history. If you don't believe me, read Howard Zinn's The People's History of America, and you would get a rude awakening regarding that. I'm pretty sure you read Howard Zinn's book.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was discussed in the class and in the textbook was that, you know, we're taught K through 12 that America's a melting pot where people blend in and we become we just Americans, and it doesn't really matter where you come from. The author of the text, Diane Kendall, she's a PhD, a professor at Baylor University, said that's actually hogwash. She says the reality is American society is based on an Anglo-conformity model, meaning your ability to be successful is based on your ability to conform to Anglo-Saxon culture norms, values, and beliefs, right? So most people don't know that Nikki Haley, up until the late 90s, she was a Sikh. And many would argue for political reasons, she converted to Christianity. right? And then would anglicize her name, so on and so forth. So we see this push, this focus on white acceptance, not only in politics, but in American society and culture in general, extremely problematic. I can only imagine, right, if her children, if you see your mom sitting up here capping, right, that's a young people word, right, stating that the racism doesn't exist, it's just, so on and so forth. And the kids are like, well, damn, what are you talking about, right? For example, Haley's mother, or her parents, purchased a home, South Carolina, they're from India. In the deed, it stated that they could not have black people in their house. Okay? Her mother was a dressmaker. White people wouldn't buy the dresses because the woman was Indian. Her father had a PhD. He couldn't get a job. So he settled, according to her family, to work at a HBCU. So this woman has experienced racism throughout her life, but then to come up and, make these type of claims, it truly speaks to, what their true intents and purposes are. And I would argue that if someone is doing this, and of course at the national level, we see this, but we even see this at the local level, even in predominantly black districts, individuals are promoting this type of narrative. I would definitely argue that these candidates aren't going to work for the benefit of people of color in this country.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, so yes, why politicians are unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. So just move it a little bit forward. Black History Month. I know you wrote a couple articles. You wrote like 20 articles in 2 days, right? Prolific out here, right? You're dropping dimes like Magic Johnson. You talked about people trying to profit off of Black History Month. How so?
Yeah, that was the most recent article that I wrote, and why I wrote that is I was reading on the news. There was a situation where a company had released a book, and it was being sold in Target, and Target had to pull the book because it was mislabeling certain prominent figures in Black history. So, specifically W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, and Booker T. Washington. The labels had swapped the names, and it had incorrectly labeled them. So what that tells me is this company was in such a rush to just put out a book to profit off of Black History Month that no care or proper research was even done in putting the book together. So they were just trying to rush out, a product to put it on the shelves and sell it to make a profit off of Black History Month. And unfortunately, in the capitalist system, that tends to be what happens when things become, accepted within the mainstream. Not only Black History Month, Juneteenth. I remember Juneteenth before it became a nationally recognized
federal holiday. Yes,
federal holiday. Yeah, but it was different. It felt more intimate. It felt more rooted in the community. And once it became a national holiday, now it seems like every corporation is trying to monetize Juneteenth and make a profit off of it, and it tends to lose the soul and the spirit of what the celebration was. And I think Black History Month, that's definitely something I see happening a lot with Black History Month. I mean, and something that I noticed years ago about Black History Month, the way that whole celebration seems to be removed from the founder of Black History Month. Very rarely do you hear about Carter G. Woodson whenever Black History Month comes around, but that was his creation. He's the one who created Negro History Week, which became Black History Month. And I just I think that again goes back to the way that history is dealt with in this country. That Carter G. Woodson promoted a lot of viewpoints and had an ideology which definitely would not fit well with the mainstream, or what the mainstream expects from a Black scholar. So because Woodson, his approach to scholarship was something that was a direct challenge to white supremacy in America, I feel like Black History Month tends to be separated from his work and his legacy, to water it down and make it something that's easier to sell or to monetize.
Absolutely. I think another issue when we talk about, so why do you think the rush to try to make money off of Black History Month is also rooted in a lack of respect for Black people?
No, definitely, because even just going back to the example I gave of the situation at Target, if you have respect for Black history, you would do your due diligence. You would actually, do the research, make sure you're properly labeling, these individuals. The fact that they were mislabeled, it let me know that there was really no care for Black history. It's just an opportunity to make money, and they went with it.
Right. Good point.
Because we would know as historians, right? We take time to do the research, so we understand who men like W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, and Booker T. Washington are. We understand who they are, why they're important, and what they look like. That's all part of the process of engaging history. Understanding who these people are, but understanding that depending on the point in time where this individual came in history, if there's documented photographs of the individual, you tend to want to know what the individual looks like.
Right.
That's all part of the process of engaging in Black history. So if you're trying to sell Black history books and you're not even bothered to look up what these historical figures look like, then that just it tells me you really don't care. You're trying to make money.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we tend to find is pushback against Black History Month. Some people argue that Black History Month is racist. But I always tell people, listen, you have a right to have your perspective, right? But I always tell people that I need that same energy for Women's History Month, Latino Heritage Month, Jewish Heritage Month, LGBTQ Month, Filipino Heritage Month, etc. Right? But we don't tend to find that type of energy. So I tell people, because I don't have the same energy for other identity groups, history or cultural month celebrations, it's giving that you're an anti-Black racist. Right? So
yeah.
I think that's something to be cognizant of as well. For some reasons, I don't know, right? But for many, Black history is a threat to people, right? And I think part of that threat is it counters the master narrative, the narrative that Black people didn't have a history. We don't have it because we have nothing to be proud of, and we should simply be poor imitations of whites, right? And so when you counter that narrative and you teach people to disengage from the concept of self-loathing and white pedestalization, you tend to find people being harder to control, right? And I know we've discussed this offline before, where you stated that I think you said Dr. Amos Wilson stated the only freedom that we really have is the freedom to self-destruct.
Yep.
Right, not the freedom to think for ourselves, to act for ourselves, and to build for ourselves, but the freedom to self-destruct. So something to be cognizant of. Let me ask you this question as we move back to Governor Haley. What are your thoughts on her ideology, her talking points being rooted in non-Black people of color's complicity with white supremacy?
That's actually something that stood out to me. She kept saying, as a brown girl. And it's interesting because when we talk about the history of racism in America, historically the worst racism hasn't been against brown Indian people; it's been against Black African people. So right. That's part of the problem as well. That obviously brown people, Indian people have experienced racism, but it's not the same type of racism. So for her to say as a brown girl and then use her experiences as an Indian, and as you pointed out, she's a white passing Indian, but to use her experiences as an Indian to make a very broad statement about racism in America, it's almost one of those things that you look at it and you think, well, it's not really her place to speak on the history, because her historical experiences or historical experiences of Indians in America is not the same historical experiences as Black people in America. So it's almost one of those situations where she's using her identity as a non-white person to essentially nullify the history of Black people in America, particularly the history of struggle against racism.
Absolutely, absolutely. Peace, family. If you're watching, we're discussing why are politicians unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. You're watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube. Make sure you get, matter of fact, get those thumbs up, all right? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. The link is in the chat, family. If you all want to tap in, be part of the conversation, we're here with the man, the myth, the legend, your favorite historian's favorite historian, your favorite Pan-Africanist, Dwayne Omawale, historian, Pan-Africanist scholar, soon to be Juris Doctor. And of course, he's written over 24 books on the history of African people, not only just on the continent, but in the diaspora as well. So he, of course, is the resident expert who's always welcome here on Lumumba Speaks at any time. In fact, family, he gives me an education probably 3 times a week, and that's how often we talk. So definitely, if you think I'm knowledgeable, I'm nothing compared to Brother Dwayne Omawale. And this isn't something I'm just, I'm saying here on camera. He knows I talk about him like this to him on the phone on a regular basis, even when we're Skyping or FaceTime and so on and so forth. So non-Black people of color, the complicity with white supremacy. Why do you think this takes place?
I mean, the reason why it takes place, and this is why I don't like, using that rhetoric about people of color, because the reality is that non-white people aren't a monolithic group. And within that group, specifically Indian people as a collective group, a collective ethnic or racial group, have their own particular interests, and those interests aren't necessarily always aligned with African people. So the point I'm making here is that, when we talk about white supremacy and racism, all non-white groups of people who've been oppressed by white supremacy don't necessarily have the same interest. Our interests may converge in certain areas. When we talk about a collective struggle against white racism, but there are conflicts as well. And particularly if we're talking about Indian people, that there is a lengthy history of anti-black racism from Indian people. One of the most famous examples of this, and it's an ironic example, given his impact on the civil rights movement, was Mahatma Gandhi. He was a notorious racist who, if you read his writings, wrote very awful things about African people. Very much aligned with the type of racist stereotypes you see from white supremacists. Gandhi was
Absolutely.
writing about how Africans were savage and backwards, and that type of thing was found in Gandhi's writings. And those views aren't unique to Gandhi. If you study the history of South Africa, you'd find historically there was a lot of tension between Africans there and the Indian settlers for that reason, because the Indian settlers came into South Africa, and even though they were living in Africa, they didn't identify as Africans. They came as Indians who actually looked down on the African population, and they viewed themselves as having an interest which was separate and different from the African people. So when we talk about the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, many Indians actually did not participate in the anti-apartheid struggle because they weren't concerned about the well-being of African people in South Africa. What they were trying to do is secure their own interest. And again, Gandhi's writings, you'll find that Gandhi was more concerned about the treatment of Indians in South Africa than he was about the Africans in South
Very true,
Africa.
very true, very true. And in fact, when we talk about the history of anti-black racism, one of the things I share with my students is that the history of anti-black racism goes back to antiquity. Of course, many of us believe are of the belief that anti-black racism is something that was created by Europeans. But when we talk about even in the Indian subcontinent, in the Hindu religion, we know there's a racial caste system in the Hindu religion. And of course, if you're darker skinned, what you're considered to be of a lower caste, Dravidian, untouchable. And if you're lighter skinned, you have a higher status in Indian society. And of course, this is something that the British were able to use to their benefit during colonialism. But of course, we know it predates British colonialism by thousands of years. And so we have to understand that anti-blackness is ubiquitous in nature. And that, once again, as I think you made a great point, we can't assume or be of the assumption that because a person is of color, whatever the heck H-double hockey sticks that means, right? That means that person would be an ally. And we know we've had shows on allyship before as well. And why, of course, it could be a benefit or problematic, but why we should not make the assumption that person would be, of course, someone who's seeking to help Black people fight against, of course, anti-Black racism.
Yeah, and the history, the history of Black Indian relations in the United States is a little bit different. But when you look at, like I said, I gave the example of South Africa, but it's not just South Africa. Uganda and several other African countries, you find these tensions between the African and the Indian population, and in the Caribbean as well. Certain Caribbean countries, particularly Trinidad and Guyana, you see the same history of tensions between Indians and African people. So as it relates to Nikki Haley, the fact that she's Indian and making these comments, I think we'd have to look at the historical relationship between African people and Indian people as a group. And when we look at that historical relationship, we'd find that even though Indian people have also been oppressed by Europeans, there still is a tension between the African and the Indian population, rooted largely in the fact that Indians don't see themselves as sharing a common struggle with African people.
This is very true. Very true. And when we speak state Indians, we're not talking about people indigenous to America, right? We don't want to get that Christopher Columbus thing going on here, right? We're talking about, of course, people who are indigenous or native to the Indian subcontinent. Yes.
Or in Guyana, how that distinction is made is that Indians, from the Indian subcontinent are East Indians, and we have a phrase Amerindian, meaning American Indian. Those are the native Indians.
Right. Absolutely. So, peace family, if you're watching, we're having a conversation. Why are politicians unwilling? Keyword unwilling to admit that America's a racist country. We're discussing, in particular, Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, current Republican candidate for the presidential nomination for, of course, President of the United States. She, of course, had a town hall on CNN where she stated that she experienced some racism, of course, for her family as a little brown girl. in America and South Carolina, but that America was not a racist country. And she even argued, the concept of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution's idea of all men are created equal, even though that was not the actual reality. She got a little pushback from, of course, the CNN analyst who's argued, I majored in history in New Hampshire, and that is not the case. But she argued once again that the intent, of course, was to do the right thing. This is one of the myths that we tend to find when we talk about the master narrative. One of the myths in the master narrative is the myth of a moral America, right? That these people were, devoutly, obsequiously, servile and subservient to, God. And so as a result, that made them, of course, morally superior, but we find that, of course, that wasn't the case as well. But like you said, if you just read the literature of the writings of the people who, of course, were the architects of the Declaration of Independence, you would know that that is not the case whatsoever. And as you stated, I think rather eloquently, if the intent was to do the right thing, why didn't they just do it the first time, right? So just absolutely nonsensical. But these are some of the talking points that we tend to find politicians making on either side of the aisle, Republican or Democrat, white, black, all points in between. And this speaks to, of course, when we talk about that both parties are funded by the same special interest groups, right? And so we know oftentimes politicians are more willing to actually, acquiesce to their donors, right? Those who are putting money in their coffers rather than the actual constituents that they are said to be sworn to serve. So, this whole concept of democracy, or something that we may need to unpack. In fact, I wrote an article on that on Medium. You all need to check that out. I might put it in the link in the chat momentarily. But that's another issue we talk about, the America institutionally, structurally being racist. A good example would be immigration laws, right? Immigration laws were created to make sure that America was what? A majority white country, right? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, that's been part of the history of America, that immigration laws are crafted in such a way to encourage immigration from Europe, while discouraging or even barring immigration from other countries, particularly African, Caribbean, and Asian nations.
Absolutely, and part of that was done. Most people would argue to specifically guarantee, keyword, to specifically guarantee that America would be a majority white nation, because when we talk about democracy, particularly in the American context, and this may be global in nature, but we're going to just focus here in America, democracy is based on majority rules, majority wins. And so the majority of people are white, and irrespective of what a party they're part of, they're going to vote in the interest of white people and to the detriment of non-white people. Hey, you have a rigged game, right? You've set the deck. Right, it's comp on when you run them full on the basketball court. So something that I think we need to be cognizant of, and many would argue that when we find people, once again, of color doing this, is because they're trying to they're the mindset of, if you can't beat them, join them. So I'm gonna play a clip from the Breakfast Club of her interview with the Breakfast Club, and then we're gonna tap back in. Once again, family, the link is in the chat if you want to be part of the conversation. We're discussing why our politicians are unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. All right, so let me bring this up here. Give me 1 second, family. Fair use, fair use, fair use.
Now, I wonder, why can't politicians, Democrat and Republican, because we've heard you say America's never been a racist country. We've heard the vice president say that before. We've heard OG Jim Clyburn say that before. We've heard Tim Scott say that before. Why can't Democrats and Republicans just be honest and tell people, hey, we can't have honest conversations about racism in this country because it's not a good electoral strategy?
I mean, that's not why I do it.
That's why.
No,
that's why everybody does.
I have talked about racism as it affected me and how we need to get past it. I mean,
you can't talk about it and say America's never been a racist. You can't say America's never been a racist country, but then talk about the racism you experienced.
There is racism in our country. Mm-hmm. I don't think that our country was founded to be racist. I don't. I think that it was meant to be this amazing experiment to see if we could have freedom and democracy in a way that all men are created equal.
But if you didn't look at all men,
we are not there yet.
But if you didn't look at all men as equal from the beginning, then the ideology is flawed.
But why do you want kids to hear that they live in a racist country? Why can't you tell kids, look, we're not perfect and we have some more things to fix? I don't want any child to think like that. I don't want any child to believe that they're disadvantaged from the second they're born. I didn't want to feel that.
I don't think it's a disadvantage. I think if you tell somebody,
is, though.
I think if you tell somebody it's cold outside, that just makes them put on a coat.
No, it makes them know what it's going to feel like before they even get outside. I don't want kids to feel that. I want them to get outside with confidence and strength and know that they can be anything. We have to do that.
But they got to know the truth too. You know,
Yeah, I
they
don't
have to
think
know
there's nothing wrong
the
with telling
truth.
people
You
the
know,
truth.
like I have two black sons, and they have to understand what they're facing when they go out to this world. It's not going to be the same as, let's say, my neighbor or a classmate. It's going to be the same. And the same
truth
thing
didn't
with
stop
you.
you.
And
Yeah.
same thing with you. If you
truth
have
did not
brothers,
stop you.
and let's say your brothers wore the same thing that your dad wore, they weren't going to have the same lifestyle, and they were going to be looked at differently than your other classmate.
Look,
It's the truth.
There was a We Miss Bamberg pageant that everybody would put their children in. It was the big thing in Bamberg. You always put your kids in. So my mom decided to put me and my sister in this pageant. And I was disqualified because they had a black queen and they had a white queen. And they said they didn't know where to put me because if I was in the black category, the blacks would be mad. If I was in the white category, the whites would be mad. So they gave me a beach ball and sent me on my way.
A beach ball.
Yeah, I know that's all I got, right? Only after my mom said, will you at least let her sing her song? You're never going to believe it. My song was This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. Listen, did my parents sit down and say to us what happened here was wrong? Yes. But did they say, this is the way the country is? No, my mom said, you get up, you show that we're going to make it better tomorrow. It's my mentality that I want everybody to know we all have a job to do, and that's to fix this country. And we never stop doing it. We have racism, and it's terrible. I've felt it. Y'all felt it. A lot of people have felt it. But are we not going to fight every day to make sure that we stomp it out wherever we see it? Absolutely. But I don't want kids being raised to think that they're never going to get past it. I want them to think that they can actually be the ones that help us get past it.
But they have to know what it is. You can't take it out of classrooms. You can't take it out of curriculum. You can't act like it doesn't exist.
They got to know what they're fighting for.
Yeah, I have to heal it in order. You have to reveal it in order to heal it.
But didn't we learn in South Carolina? We learned about it. We learned about it in history classes. You should always talk about it in history classes. You don't know how to keep bad things from happening if you don't look at the past and say, okay, how do we go for it? Those are the lessons that we have to learn. I think it's fine to talk about it. I have no issues with that. Don't judge people who are trying to do right now. And don't live in the past. Let's look forward and say, what do we want to look like?
So why did you take the Confederate flag down? Was it because it was a symbolism of racism or hate?
All right. Very good, very good. So one thing, she's pushing back against this concept of America being a racist country. But when she was governor, she actually, and this is fact, and you can fact check me on this, wrote an executive order creating an Arizona-style immigration law, right? And it was struck down by the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. So this is the woman who's engaged in her own brand of Islamophobia and racism when she was, of course, the chief executive officer of the state of South Carolina. But you know what? But Bawana, I'm gonna give you the floor.
Well, first of all, let me say goodnight to you all great brothers. Brother Lumumba, I'm still waiting on that. I'm still waiting on when I can call you other than Brother Lumumba. I'm still waiting on that.
So I have an update. So I've finished the first 3 chapters of my dissertation. Appreciate you asking. And I didn't respond. You put a comment up one time. I didn't say nothing because things were it was a bit rough. But I finished the first 3 chapters after a couple of revisions. My committee loves it. I have been able to secure a location. I've been online with Brother Dwayne. We've talked about this a number of times. I've secured a actual Black Culture Center to do my data collection. And I'm in the process of simply waiting on IRB, the Internal Review Board, to sign off on my study. So I submitted an expedited application this past Monday. They responded back Thursday, wanted me to make some revisions to the application. I made those revisions this morning and sent it off this afternoon. So once I hear back from them, I'm going to be off to Cleveland. They say off to see the Wizard, but off to see the Cavaliers, right? They'll go into Cleveland State University, and then I'll be doing my data collection at the Howard Mims Black Cultural Center at Cleveland State University. Once I do the data collection, come back home, go through the data, look for particular themes, and then of course write up the results, and then you could call me doctor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
So
I hope in the future.
Very quickly.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
My advisor, we're on a timeline. The goal is for me to finish my PhD by May.
By May. I'll hold you to that. I'll hold you to that. I'll hold you to that. And you know what? Good night to you too, Dwayne. I hope that in the future, you and Dwayne work together. I think you all make a powerful combination in terms of teaching.
Teacher.
Yeah, the teacher of the community. I think y'all be brilliant at it. Yeah. But in terms of this lady, Nikki Haley, she says that America is not a racist country. And I expect her not to say that America is a racist country. Why would she? Why would she do that? Every politician is supposed to speak. She is speaking in the international media, forums. Why would she speak against her country? She's going to speak in positive terms against the country. But when you think about it, if America is not a racist country, why does she anglicize her name? Why doesn't she go by her name, her original name?
Absolutely.
Just go by your name. Because she understands full well that America already had Obama, Hussein, or however he got in the door, and America is not ready for another non-American. And this is what the rank and file person in Bible Belt America is thinking. She understands that very well. I think her dad taught at HBCU in South Carolina. So she understands these things very, very well. Also, I think it's a little insulting to even suggest that America is not a racist country to a person from South Carolina when she fully knows that a young white man gunned down old black women in church, and he says the reason is because he feels like the great white replacement theory.
Absolutely.
So I'm asking, to say this to someone from South Carolina is really an insult. It's a blatant insult.
Absolutely.
But like I say, politicians are gonna do what politicians are gonna do. Right. She's not gonna speak. I don't expect her to speak poorly and negatively and say, even though everyone knows the truth. Everyone knows it. The whole world saw George Floyd. You can't hide George Floyd. You can't unsee. The Nigerians can't unsee that.
You still have people trying to play the bait and switch, saying, well, no, even though you saw him being killed, Sister Mary Shy, appreciate you, sister. Hope you could tap in. She said, I'm sick, so I will listen in. Well, we hope you get better, sister. We know you're here with us, Black Power. Sister Michelle, just turn your camera on so I can see you in queue, then I'll bring you in. Just turn your camera on and queue, then I'll bring you in. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. You can turn your camera off and then I'll bring you in. Okay. So yeah, this is an issue that you're speaking to, Brother Bawana, and it's really an insult to one's intelligence. If you want to be quite honest, that you're having a conversation with someone from South Carolina, as you stated, who wrote a manifesto, as many of these white vigilante killers do. And then they say, well, we don't know why he did it. What are you talking about, right? But this tends to be the case, where he has some mental health issues, like the Buffalo shooter, unfortunately. And we know that went viral, right? And all of it is based on this concept of white replacement theory, right? I was at the gym, as I always am, it's Body by Lumumba all day, every day out here, right? Got to have that hard body suit on Batman, right? Let me stop. And there was a brother, he's a Christian brother, good brother though. We've had some great conversations while we're working out, But I told him, he said, I kind of noticed, that a lot of white people are being aggressive. And I said, yeah, you need to get you a firearm. I said, typically when that's happening is because they're armed and they're looking for an excuse. They're looking for a reason. So I said, this is something you need to be cognizant of, particularly living where we live. So, he thought about that, said, man, you may be right. I said, ain't no maybe, I know I'm right. So not only do you need to arm yourself, you need to have your behind and your two kids at the range learning how to shoot as well. Right?
Yes, sir. As American citizens, I would suggest that you guys as American citizens should practice your Second Amendment rights. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. There's one last thing I wanted to say to you. I can't even remember. It slipped me right now. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me as we all speak. It'll come back to me.
All right, Sister Michelle, the resident sister.
Hi, Happy New Year. Happy Black History Month. Hello to the panel. It's been a minute since I've been on here.
Yes, and it's
Greetings
been
to
a minute.
everyone.
You may have it on in the background.
I have a background.
Yeah, because we're hearing like echo.
Okay, then let me just turn my mic off and just listen for a while until I can fix it. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. So very quickly, while sister, she's dealing with some technical difficulties. Carl Weathers, right? He transitioned today at the age of 76. He's famous for playing Apollo Creed in the Rocky series. Of course, he starred as Action Jackson and even in the movie Happy Gilmore. So I want to definitely give a shout out to Carl Weathers. He was able to successfully make the transition from an athlete playing on the gridiron as a linebacker. And he actually led the team on defense in the San Diego Aztecs football team. They had 2 undefeated seasons. He then played, I believe, 2 seasons with the Oakland Raiders and was able to transition into being an actor, iconic actor. And so, he's known for playing, of course, the iconic character Apollo Creed, where he was this great athlete, great heavy, undisputed lineal heavyweight champion, fast hands, fast feet, really epitomized what it meant to be, an African-American boxer, right? And many people talk about in boxing, there's different ethnic groups that have different styles of fighting. Eastern Europeans are known for having a straight up style, jab, right hand. Latinos are known for the left hook to the body, right? And, the blood and guts type warrior to where you never take a step back. Then, of course, we know the stereotype with African-American fighters is that they're fast hands, fast feet, great, very athletic style, and known for their skill, technique, and so on and so forth. So definitely want to give a shout out to Carl Weathers, who transitioned to the realm of the ancestors. And of course, he's survived by his 2 sons. So definitely want to give a shout out because, as we know, he was one of my favorite actors. And of course, Rocky IV was one of my favorite movies. Brief story, nostalgic moment. Actually, I recall watching Rocky IV for the first time as a 5-year-old on VHS, and I was sitting on my dad's lap the entire time, and watched the movie. Iconic film is one of my favorite movies. I probably watch it about 24 times a year, and I could even recall, my children were little. They're teenagers, they don't like to do much with me now, but I actually had them watch the movie with me when they were young children, and of course, it became one of their favorites as well. So it has a cult following, but that's what it's most known for. But it's sad, but of course, it's a moment of joy that he's transitioned to the realm of the ancestors. So we know he's with us in the spirit realm now. Sister Michelle, you're back.
Is the background gone?
I think it is.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay,
Yes.
Again, greetings everyone. Greetings to all my brothers on the panel. Thank you for having me on
Greetings.
today. My concern is with the Nikki Haley situation. Haley.
Mm-hmm.
As you pointed out, as the brother pointed out, her changing her name, the significance of you changing your name, and the significance of what we as Black people have to do to assimilate by changing that name. And we can speak to that within itself. Describes how marginalized we as Black people have been in this country. From the time you walk on this land, they make you change your identity. And I don't think people understand the significance of changing a person's identity. And so we can speak more into changing a person's identity, especially as we advocate for resources. And why is that so significant, especially as we're experiencing this migrant crisis in various parts of the United States?
Now, when you say make you, will you argue that maybe there's pressure, but we still have a choice? Or when you say make, could you provide an example of Black people being forced?
Okay. Force was when slavery started back in the 1400s all the way till the 1800s.
Yes, ma'am.
Then you have the African migrants from the Caribbean and the continent coming maybe in the 1920s and 30s, but significantly starting in the 1960s and 70s because of education. So mainly they were starting to more migrate to the United States, Canada, and England. Mm-hmm. So in order to maybe obtain a job or, have an easier time in the workforce, you change your name to assimilate. So if your name was, for example, I had a friend named Aditobi, but she told the job to call her Addie so she can assimilate. So
Anglo conformity model. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so even though her name is Addie Toby, she calls herself Addie just so that she can assimilate, easier time in the workforce. You know, again, trying to support herself, probably supporting her family back home as well. So what do? You know, this global economic system marginalizes us. So you do have to compromise your identity in some shape or fashion to even get some type of benefit. And I wish somebody could have called Nikki Haley on that.
Nikki Haley, I'm sorry for cutting in, Michelle.
No, please.
Nikki Haley and most politicians, they are extremely careful, especially when they are being interviewed on camera. They would never sit down in front of a person who is a thinker, someone like Brother Lumumba, Dwayne Amwali, who understands history and understands the historical impact of history. Michelle, a person like yourself, Michelle, she would never sit down in front of a camera because she don't want to be caught out there. Because when you start challenging her in terms of the historical ramifications of why did you change your name? You know, when we start talking about in terms of immigration, Dwayne is from someone from Guyana. You know, so you're not gonna just slip past certain questions past him because he has a real lived experience and he can articulate the experience on camera. They're not gonna get on camera with these kinds of people. They're gonna get on camera with Cardi B. They're gonna get on camera with Charlemagne the God, and these people are gonna ask them safe questions that are gonna be answerable, questions that where they won't come across looking silly. They're very careful. So that's the reason why she would never be caught on camera in front of intellectual people who think, professional-minded people. She would never do that. Not on camera, maybe off camera, but never on camera. But I'll leave it there and let y'all guys go.
Okay, I don't even know why he calls himself Charlemagne the God. I call him Charlemagne the Joke. Because the issue I have with him every time.
Ooh, sister, you going hard in the paint, aren't you? Okay. Okay. All right. I wasn't expecting that. Okay.
Charlemagne the Joke, because Charlemagne, you start off like you're advocating for Black people. And then when it's time for you to really advocate, then I see you pulling back. And then
Could you give an example?
Example was when Larry Elder got on the show.
Right.
And Larry Elder, I'm not a fan of Larry Elder, but I'll give it to Larry Elder. He carried him. How did you have a presidential candidate tell you are not Black enough? You know, if you don't vote for him. That is such an insult.
Very true.
You know, we should, as United States citizens and people with voting rights, unquote unquote, we should be able to vote on the best person for the job or the best person that serves our interests. And they've made us Black people as a monolithic group, but now they're seeing that everybody is going to different directions based on their needs. And Charlemagne the God could not call him on that, and then Larry Elder carried you on it because you try to insult him on his political beliefs. But I got issues with Larry Elder myself. But guess what? You couldn't carry Larry Elder. He carried you.
Well, now I would say this, sister, and the Anglo-conformity model is a real issue. I was looking for my old sociology textbook. I can't find it. It's buried under here somewhere in the LL Lumumba library, right? Innocent plug, right? But Sister Mary Shai, she states Vivek, right? He didn't change his name, and he is from Ohio. He's very wealthy. Now, so the argument would be, and I guess the supposition of the statement that Sister Mary has made is that you don't have to do these things to be successful. And I would agree, you don't have to do these things to have success in America. You don't. And the greatest example of this is what? Barack Obama was president of the United States.
Okay, you don't have to. You may not have to do it, but you never know what circumstances a person is initially in, especially as they come into the country and where they're at within themselves.
I agree with that, but I'm going to quote the late.
But yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. You don't have to change your name. Necessarily to be successful. That's not my point. My point is many people feel they are in situations where they need to assimilate fast and quick because of other pressures that are going on. Right. Again,
and I understand that, of course, particularly financially. But I would argue two things, and of course, please push back. The panel could push back. I I think there's two things. One, I think a lot of people who feel they need to do that is rooted in the insecurity that they have with their own person. And then two, Marcus Garvey stated what? Irrespective of what conditions we are in, we should never hate or dislike ourselves.
Okay, and that person
yes, please go right ahead.
And that person I speak of who changed her name to Addie from Addie, she prefers to date white men.
I want to push back on one thing. I don't think that Vivek was actually running to become president. I think that was a big marketing campaign to later sell whatever company he's going to be invested in. I think that was just a big marketing campaign to sell his products, to get people to know who he is. Because I don't feel like he thought he was going to actually be president of the United States. I really don't feel so. I think it was a big, huge marketing campaign. I could be wrong, but I don't think he was trying to win. I really don't think so.
So let me ask this question. Do you believe that a person of Indian or Asian descent can become president of the United States?
Going forward, possibly, yes.
What say you?
No.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see why not. But what I would say, though, it's the dynamics are a little bit different because, when we talk about Obama being a black president, there's black people as a political group in America are an established group. And I think, with Asians in American politics don't seem to have the same force and same influence at the moment. So I wouldn't say no. But given what the Asian community is in terms of, the political impact in America, it might be more difficult for an Asian to become president than it was for Obama.
Right.
I think the reasons
go ahead, Juana.
The reasons why Obama was elected is different reasons why white voters would want to vote for Vivek. I think that there's distinctive different reasons, because it would appear that Obama came from the black community, even though many African Americans don't consider him to be African American in the eyes of white voters.
On that, please, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Back to that, not to take you too much off that point. He married a black American woman of, how should I say, FBA descent. And if you understand marriage and the political nature of marriage, he married into someone of that lineage. So once you married to someone of that lineage, so you're affiliated. See, this is why a lot of my FBA and ADOS colleagues, they push back on me when I talk about Barack Obama. Yes, he may not have the lineage. So that's why he married Michelle Obama, to have access to that lineage. And because his marriage was accepted and recognized as a community, you have to partially accept Obama.
Well, so I would say this, sister. We don't know why he married her. But hold on. I've read all the books that he's written. And the book, and based on what he said, my interest in her was because she was fine and because she was smart. And he never said anything, and anything that he's written or said I was trying to marry, I wanted to be part of her lineage. So what I'm saying is that may be a bit of hyperbole there.
No. But what I'm saying, he never admitted that. But what Black Americans now are saying that he's African. Yes, he's of African descent lineage per se, but they're arguing he's not of Black American lineage.
Well, real quick. Here at Lumumba Speaks, we use the term African American.
African American, please excuse me. And the reason why, I use the word black because black people are now trying to delineate from Africa.
Well, and that's extremely problematic.
And I'm seeing that a lot even as I go to work now. So that's why I may interchange it.
Yeah, we don't want to engage in self-abnegation, right? Because very quickly, the part of the dehumanizing process of chattel enslavement was a process, according to Dr. Ali Missouri, titled he coined the term dis-Africanization, in which we were stripped of our African identities and given a racial identity, right? And so when we talk about restoring ourselves, when we talk about some of those healing rituals that takes place at the Panafest Festival in Ghana, we talk about the secret societies and maroon societies during the Holocaust of enslavement, which we never acquiesced. It was the reclaiming of one's African name, identity, heritage, religious, spiritual beliefs, right? And so I would make the argument for us to truly be fully human in the death, decadence, and dysphoria of the Western world. We have to reaffirm our African identity and not affirm and latch on to a racial identity.
Okay, I understand that. But if you have someone like Tariq Nasheed event.
Well, we don't take him serious. We understand that this is a man who is a charlatan, and his goal is to make money. And much of what he says is rooted in misinformation. It's ahistorical, and every problem he creates, because he tends to create issues, right? The solution is to purchase a product from him. So we're not going to take someone like that serious.
Yeah, but he has affected the mood of our
yes, and it's based on our people's collective ignorance.
And I'm even seeing this as I interact with my people on a regular basis. I'm not African American, I'm Black American. African.
I mean, we call ourselves a lot of things that we shouldn't, but that doesn't mean that we should substantiate that behavior.
And so
that thinking, it did predate Tariq Nasheed, because I remember Herman Cain, when he was running for president, he said the same thing. He said he's Black American, not African American. So that rejection of Africa, that does predate Tariq Nasheed.
Yeah, and it's rooted in self-hatred. I mean, it's just a reality. The role of trying to disidentify with your heritage, Africa, is rooted in the fact that the individuals view Africa negatively. This is a reality. That's the basis of. Now, we have people who could try to, in a pseudo-intellectual manner, give a different perspective of why that is the case. But the basis of people are seeking to disidentify with their heritage for any reason, irrespective of what a person's racial ethnic background is rooted in the fact that they view it negatively. You have some people who are Italian Americans, second, third, fourth generation. They view the old country as backwards, so on and so forth. So they disidentify with being Italian. Same with Germans, etc. So all of that is rooted in self-hatred.
Okay, I agree, but what is there to address this self-hatred now? Because it is becoming very, very pronounced.
Absolutely. Well, there are a number of things that you can do, and I think Brother Dwayne would be, of course, the person to answer this question better than I can. But I will answer the question, and of course, I will allow Brother Dwayne and, of course, Brother Bawano to speak. But one of the things you need to do is you need to educate yourself on actual history. A lot of the self-hatred is based on misinformation, right? The master narrative. African booty scratchers, so on and so forth. We were swinging from trees in the jungles, and no civilization, no art, no culture of any kind. So much of that is rooted in self-hatred, because I've yet to meet a person of African descent who actually learned and studied actual African history and then didn't like who they were or where they came from. I've never experienced it. I've been in the higher ed for the past 10, 12 years. As a matter of fact, Malcolm X talked about this. Right? So in the work that I've done over the past, 16, 17 years, when people learn the actual history, their views of who they are and where they come from change for the better. Right? I know this because I teach African American history for a living. The second issue is Malcolm X talked about this in his speech. You can't hate the roots of a tree without hating the tree itself. You can't hate your origin. You can't hate where you come from without hating yourself. Well, Malcolm stated this. It was 1963 in Los Angeles, California. He said, you can't show me. You show me a Black person who has a negative view of Africa, and that is a Black person who has a negative disposition of themselves. This is the reality.
Okay, and that negative disposition to ourselves has translated into crime. It has translated into disparaging of families, gentrification on a high level, not understanding the value of sustaining and maintaining families, involvement in the cult system. I mean, it is so, our self-hatred, even on the continent, the Caribbean, is so pronounced. It's I think it needs its own mental health diagnosis. And
actually it does. Actually, matter of fact, I'm gonna bring this up. Let me I'm gonna act like I'm in my class. So there are a number. I'm glad you brought that up. So I think this is week 2 or week 3. I went over this with my students. Brother Dwayne, do you want to give any thoughts on what we're discussing right now? Well, real quick, let me bring this up here. We're kind of shifting here, but it's okay. Let me bring this up.
I think it ties in. It ties in.
Yeah, it does. Let me see here. All right, here we go. So week 2. I cover this, right? Dr. Naeem Akbar, you talk about the needs of mental health diagnosis and anti-self disorder, right? According to Dr. Naeem Akbar, anti-self disorder is found among persons who identify with the oppressor, are hostile to and reject members of their own groups, right? This is in the book, of course, American Psychology, 4th edition. Next is alien self-disorder. Alien self-disorder, according to Dr. Akbar, is found among persons who behave in ways that are counter to their natural disposition. This goes to what you were speaking to, sister. A symptom of this would be materialism. Akbar argues that African Americans have been socialized, keyword socialized, with materialistic goals and evaluate their worth by the prevalence of material accomplishments. We see this being promoted, of course, in what many people call hip hop and rap. I'm gonna play this video very quickly, and then we'll get back to the conversation. But this is the video that really represents what Dr. Akbar was speaking of. So,
my house, get my hair done. 90% of my friends are Black gay male men. So what he did to me, they're really loyal and very loving and understanding and respectful. Loyalty and respect.
All of your friends?
To me. Yeah, all the gay ones. Yeah.
Right. Not all gay Black men.
Yeah, the ones that I have, my friends, yeah.
All right, because I know some low down ones.
Yeah.
Who are dishonest, stab you in the back, all of that.
No, I don't deal with those ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just like everybody else. Yeah. You know, gay folks are no different than anyone else.
I have probably like 5 Black female friends. I don't have Black friends, Black women.
Why not?
They're just really envious, really hateful, backstabbing. I would say probably like 90% that I've met, they have not.
You meeting the wrong people.
I know.
What's her deal? Sounds like you don't like Black women.
No, I don't.
Well, you don't like yourself.
No, I'm not Black.
What are you?
I'm mixed. I'm not Black. I'm human.
I mean, a lot of them denied they were Black. When the white slave master would rape the female slave, and they come out a little light skinned, and I'm not Black. They'd be like, I'm not Black. I'm mixed. But during that same time, one drop of blood essentially makes you Black. One drop of Black blood, and you look Black, and you are Black. You just don't want to admit it. You just hate yourself. And that's what a lot of the crime, Black on Black crime, Blacks killing each other, fratricide is what it's called. A lot of it, sociologists theorize, it's because of self-hate. Because if you don't like yourself and don't think much of yourself, you're certainly not going to think much of your brother or someone within your race. So now that we got that out of the way, you can insist you're not a Black person, but I think you're making a fool out of yourself to say so. Oh, yes, y'all. See? You see? You see? You hear that? If you heard that clap, you'll know. Go ahead. What else you want me to know?
Like I said, I've had bad experiences with Black women, and I've decided not to.
And 90% of them
90%
are no good. Go
Those
ahead.
are my experiences.
Go ahead. So how many we have out there? Yeah,
At least 20.
20 Black women out there. So what's 90%? 9 times 20. 18. So it's only 2 of y'all out there.
Yeah.
Which 2 you think it is? Which 2? Which 2 you think? Out of all them? Is those 2?
Yeah,
there's
those
no
2.
good? Or there's good?
Good.
18 of them are no good. Yeah. Those are only 2 good ones?
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, the rest of y'all Black women out there, you're no good.
No, that's not
90% of you.
I said from
Go
my
ahead,
experience.
ma'am. You don't think you're making a fool out of yourself. then you don't think straight. But go right ahead, ma'am.
After a while, she started changing. After she got plastic surgery done, got her nose job done, got breast implants, she started acting down at people, talking about something like Black people.
Why didn't you recommend that she get her face bleached?
I don't know.
So she could look white like she want to be.
I'm actually in the process of that.
Oh, you are? There you go. Now you're talking. Now you're getting there. You get that face bleached, then you might be closer. You'll be closer to white then. Well, I bet you if you could kill yourself and come back as white, you would do it, wouldn't you?
Definitely. I'll just have
She said, all right, ma'am. Let's get back to the dress you're sewing. It doesn't make sense that you would receive a gift.
So as you can see, it was rather comical, but I mean, she said, kill myself and come back as a white person. She said, definitely, absolutely, I would.
It's real. It's real.
Yes. No, but it spoke to what you just stated. All of these issues, the willingness to not value family, the violence, the fratricide is rooted in self-hatred. So when you say there needs to be a clinical diagnosis, there is a clinical diagnosis. But I always tell people, if you're going to see a counselor or therapist, you know, make sure that counselor or therapist is Black, and they are what? Licensed with the Association of Black Psychologists, because they provide an African-centered perspective to the issues that you are facing.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Most definitely. And then another thing I noticed about in the DC, a lot of these nonprofit organizations that are coming in, they're coming with good intentions, but you're getting Amy from Michigan, who's trying to get some student loan credits coming in, coming into Southeast DC, trying to help somebody.
Right.
You know,
the white savior complex.
You know, she, you know, has good intentions, you know, very likable, but she's still, to me, what I see, they're still missing something.
And what do you think that is?
Don't get me wrong, they have good intentions. They don't understand the complexity of why a lot of our families live in Southeast DC. A lot of families in DC now have been gentrified. Like, for example, when I was coming up, we stayed in Northwest DC. But back, we moved out of Northwest DC because
the nice part. Okay, I know about DC.
No, Northwest. We used to live in an apartment complex. That apartment complex that I was born and raised in, we had to move out when I was about 5 because it was the late 90s and the crack cocaine era hit. Mm-hmm. We used to go in the elevator, needles be there, pee in the I'm sorry, I shouldn't say, you know,
it's quite all right. It's quite all right.
You know,
I heard you with a queen pen though. I'm joking.
You know, excrements in the in the elevator.
Yes. Unfortunately,
yeah. And so a situation came where my mother had an incident in the apartment building, and my dad, she was upset, my father was upset, so we moved out to the county like within a month of that incident.
Right.
But now that apartment complex is now a condo.
Okay, gotcha. So let me shift gears very quickly. Brother Bwana, you made a statement I think was rather profound. You stated that individuals like Nikki Haley, Larry Elder, etc., they would not have a conversation with an intelligent Black person. So they go to Charlamagne the God, they go to the Cardi B's and the Megan Stallions of the world. What can we do as a community to combat that?
Continue to do what you're doing right now. You know, putting the content out there. People need to be educated, and you have the time to educate people. There are some people who know. But they really don't care to do the work in terms of educating the people and training the people and showing the people a different kind of way. You know, I know. So if I meet, Michelle was talking about your guys was talking about the ignorance that exists among us. You know, and the ignorance is prevalent, whether it's FBA, whether it's the Caribbean, whether it's Africa. This Black ignorance that exists. I know that these things exist, but I don't have the time to continuously try to educate brothers and sisters who stuck on stupid. I rather get in conversations with like-minded people where I can have a dialogue and discourse at a level where I can learn from these kinds of things. I move on and progress and do these kinds of productive things. If I am around ignorant people, I'm going to remove myself from that situation. I'm not going to try to teach a person about historical facts, historical situations that exist. All these, I'm tired. And so much of it exists. So that's not my job. That's your job, Brother Lumumba. That's Dwayne's job. He writes books on these things. If people don't want to buy and purchase the content that he's already made, whose fault is that? Let them languish. That sounds mean. The information is there. If you are interested in learning these kinds of things, in my hand, I have a smartphone. Unfortunately, smartphones don't create smart people. I have the information to the world at my hand. I could search up any information that I ever want or ever could think and consider. Why would I use my phone solely to go on World Star or trying to find channels just of a frivolous nature, people dancing and shaking their asses and shit? Where I could use this phone, I could enrich myself on this phone. I can make myself a millionaire by the use of this phone if I'm trained correctly and if I search out proper kinds of information. But I have the will to do that. There are some people out there who solely want to be entertained, and They don't want to bring anything to anything intellectual to the table. They don't want to do the work. They just want somebody to come in and pour into them. The world doesn't work like that. You have to strive as well. You have to do some effort. You have to commit yourself as well. You have to make some sacrifices as well. If you want to be ignorant and remain that way, it is what it is. Marcus Garvey say, intelligence rule the world and ignorance carries the burden. And if you want to be the burden bearer, of the world, I'll leave you to it. That's not my job, Brother Lumumba. It's not my job, brother. That's your job. That's why you go to school for 1,000 years to properly educate students. And when they come out, they'll be a product of Brother by Lumumba, body by Lumumba. When they come out, they'll speak your rhetoric instead of speaking the rhetoric of a ninth grade dropout. As far as history goes, he's a ninth grade dropout. Why are you having his utterances in your head? He's not a historian. He's not a historian. He calls himself a documentarian. He calls himself a historian. I'm saying, where have you ever seen him sit in a room with an actual historian? Would he sit in front of you, Brother Lumumba, in a camera setting where other people could see and have a dialogue with him? He would never do that. He's extremely careful. He's extreme because he knows at the end of the day, he doesn't want his audience to recognize him for what he is. And you could determine what that is. Unfortunately, many of us are beguiled by it and just carry his rhetoric like a poison. And to hear the nonsensical, ahistorical nonsense, I don't have time to correct that anymore, man. I'm getting older. It's 2024. If you want to remain ignorant, blessings to you, brother. But I'll leave it there and let y'all brothers go.
Okay, so very quickly, peace family, if you're watching, I appreciate you tapping in. Make sure you subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and we're back. We're back. Lumumba Speaks, and we're not going to have another hiatus. So we're going to be hopefully streaming 2 to 3 times a week. We're going to make sure we get our numbers.
Getting on heavy.
Oh yeah, listen. I live heavy, I read heavy, I might as well stream heavy. You know what I mean? I might as well produce some content heavy. Look, we about that life over here. All work is easy work. We always bet on black. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, and I'm gonna start posting some of our workout videos because I just deadlifted over 550. So we out here getting it. I'm going up to 600, 400 on the bench, 500 on the squat. We all day, all work is easy work. Anyway, let's get back to being intellectual. So,
Okay.
I'm gonna put real quick. I'm gonna put the link in the chat. So definitely, if you're watching, family, tap in and be part of the conversation. We love to have a diverse community of diverse viewpoints. So please tap in, be part of the conversation. I just put the link in the chat, and I'm gonna read this quote, this post by Westside Mike. Shout out to Westside Mike. He's from West Dayton. You already know what it is. West Dayton strong. He states Malcolm X went back to his community after he joined the nation and saved plenty of drug addicts. Everybody deserves a chance to have the opportunity to change and do better. Good point. I'm quite sure we have some people unpack that. I'm quite sure Brother Dwayne wants to take a stab at that situation with Brother Malcolm. Sister Michelle, go right ahead.
Well, what we need to do, one of my main things, maybe one day I'll become like you and start writing. We need some type of collective activities to reinforce our identity, to reinforce our history. So you don't necessarily have to always be in an intellectual space to receive the information. Not like a Juneteenth where we're just partying, eating. We really need to have other activities within our culture, such as the Jewish community and other ethnic communities, so we can reaffirm ourselves and discuss various issues that we need to overcome in a way that is not like we're pounding on you, trying to intellectualize you. A safe space for us to come in and have some type of activity to, again, address our needs as a person and as an individual. There are always going to be some people who are going to be able to take it to another level. Some people just need to get the basics. Some people are going to be just riding on through. But we got to have something for ourselves. For example, I believe in Toronto, Canada, they tried to have an event for Blacks only, and people got upset. There's a reason why we need to have Blacks only event because of what we're experiencing. Because even me, I've had experienced microaggressive situations in certain settings. And if you don't know me, you wouldn't understand where I'm coming from when I share these experiences. And all Amy's gonna be like, really? You know, can you rephrase what they said when you went inside? Can you interpersonalize the experience? You know, I don't need that type of conversation. I know what I saw. I know what I saw, and I know what I feel. I don't need to re-intellectualize or reframe and, you know, all that nonsense they try to throw at us. and that's what turns a lot of Black people off counseling with people of other cultures, because that's why even me, I have a counselor who I talk to. She's Black, because I can't do it with white folks. Nothing personal, but the world sees me differently. And yes, I did not experience the aggressive racists as my forefathers, but it's still there. And then another issue we need to understand is mating for Black women is different from mating for white women.
Here we go. All right now, sister. Don't set it off now. Don't set it off. Go ahead.
In terms of, okay, for example, the guy, and this I'm going to revert it back to racist country in terms of the replacement theory discussion. In terms of one of the ways to prevent in the replacement theory is to prevent reproduction. So if we don't come together as a people, you can't reproduce.
Okay.
So now we have this man and woman drama, pushing back, pulling forward, manosphere, all this happening. And yes, there are issues that we as women need to address, but I don't see the men in the manosphere necessarily questioning the court system. Even me, I'm a female, and I don't even like the court system. I wish we could take the court system out.
I think that's a good point there, and I think that's one of the shortcomings of the manosphere, right? That, you know, because we don't get anywhere as Black people with slinging mud at each other, right? And so when you argue when these gender wars is really about slinging mud, not looking at the bigger picture. And we know the African proverb states that when two elephants fight, it's the grass that loses. Right. So I think that's a great point there. What I will argue is Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, one of my big brothers in the academy, he just wrote a book, Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Flat Blackness, and Black Male Death. You probably
good book. Good book.
You read it, Brother Bwana.
I'm almost through. I'm almost through it.
Right. So so he in this book, and I've reached out to him. He's agreed to be on the show. I need to reach back out to him, see if we can schedule a time, because he's all the way out there on the West Coast in California. But he truly takes aim at the court system.
Oh, right? Good. I didn't get that. Finally.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point you made, because if someone is seriously seeking to tackle these issues, yes, there are behaviors that we engage in that are inherently dysfunctional and destructive to our communities and to our individual person, right? But we also have to look at the bigger picture as well. And how are we oftentimes working in congruence with an enemy that we believe wants to destroy us as a people, right? So the fact that he's able to connect that, I think that's why, you know, I would focus on scholars, right, rather than people in the manosphere, social media, TikTok, etc. You know, we like to argue you have a lot of people receiving therapeutic advice from TikTok therapists, right? And it just speaks to what Brother Bwana was saying about Tariq Nasheed, right? But once again, when you are dealing with people who are uneducated, oftentimes they're easy to manipulate.
Oh yes, that's what the church was for. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's another conversation we can have, right? You setting me up with shows, sister. Brother Dwayne, would you like to respond to Westside Mike's comment when he talks about Malcolm X went back in the community after he joined the nation, saved plenty of drug addicts, etc., etc. Also, before I turn the mic over to you, you mentioned, Sister Michelle, about writing, right? Us controlling the narrative regarding our community, so on and so forth. So as many of you know, and I'll put the link in the chat, this is an innocent plug, right? That I write on Medium, and I hope you all can follow me on Medium. Right?
I followed your first article, Medium, sir. The only issue I had with you, the only question that really bothered me about your article in Medium was when your first article was about. I'm not saying you don't have any right to criticize Dr. Umar. I'm not saying you don't have it, but why another black man? That just bothered me.
And I would get to that. I put the link to my actual Medium page. Two things. I was attacking the arguments he made, not him as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's number one. Second, I wanted to mention Brother Dwayne Omawale is the one who actually put the battery in my back and encouraged me to start writing on Medium. Right.
Oh,
so
good,
we talk about reach one, teach one. We talk about true Pan-Africanism. We talk about, hey, I have some information that's beneficial to me. I'm going to share it with you. We all can eat. Right. So this is one of the reasons why I wax poetically about this brother, because since I've come in contact with him, he's done nothing but share information with me to try to help me better my life for me, my family, our people. So when you talk about someone who's actually living Pan-Africanism, is giving Pan-Africanism, is giving red, black, and green, we're talking about none other than Brother Dwayne Omawale. So like I said, he's the reason why I speak about him in the way that I do.
Brother Mumba, if I was to say that if I was to have a critique of Dr. Johnson, that is my biggest issue with him. He doesn't share the podium with anyone. You know, there is a back and forward between you and your brother Dwayne. Dr. Umar Johnson is a one-man organization. You know, who is his successor? Who else is he bringing to the table to push this idea of Pan-Africanism? He's a one-man organization. And Gavi, he always calls the name of Gavi this and Gavi that. But I'm saying that when he goes from state to state, country to country, Gavi used to leave behind UNIA organizations where he went to. Besides a nice speech, what organization and institution is this man creating, building, and leaving behind when he goes from this place to that? He makes great speeches. But we always had great speakers in our community. He's a one-man organization. Where's the rest of your people? Who is in support of what you're doing and trying to buttress and help you move you forward? That's my biggest. So what if he gets sick? Sorry, buddy. Sorry.
If I could page you back on that, also, you know, part of when you put yourself out there in the public light is you should be able to accept constructive criticism. I would argue that one of the reasons I've been able to, move forward in the manner that I've been able to matriculate not only academically but in life, was because I came into the movement being taught humility, being taught you better be able to accept constructive criticism or you can't be here. Like when I first got into the movement 17, 18 years ago, I was egocentric like a mofo. I mean, I was like, this is going to be about me. My name is going to be on this and da-da-da-da-da. And the elders were like, oh, no, it ain't. Matter of fact, you're going to sit your behind in the back and hand out programs. What? Literally. Right? So I was G-checked very early on. And then that developed. Like I said, and Brother Dwayne knows me. I have a loud personality, to put it kindly, right? I mean, this is just who I am. I've been this way since I was a child. But when we have conversations, I allow him to correct me all the time, because even though I have a loud personality, and I'm a gregarious individual, I also have a level of humility, and I know I don't know everything. So that's the issue. So if someone is providing constructive criticism, Sister Michelle, that's not an attack. I know when someone is providing me constructive criticism. I give you all an example. I'm going to shut up because I said that Brother Dwayne was going to have the floor to respond to Westside Mike's comment in the chat. So African-centered, I'm wearing African clothing every day, slacks and a dashiki. I'm wearing that shit 24/7, 365. I got an interview at a HBCU that I will not name. And this is when I had I was part of the Pan-African organization, CAU, Coalition of African Unity. And so I was like, I got this interview on Monday. I'm showing up in full garb. And the brothers and sisters was like, listen, we're not going to walk out your house until you promise us you're going to put on a shirt and tie. A suit and tie. Like, why I got to do that? They said, because you do not need to give them an excuse not to hire you. And I humbled myself and I gave my word. And they knew if he gives his word, I said, okay, I will wear a shirt. I will wear a suit and tie. And I got the job. So you have to be open to critique. We don't know everything, right? I'm not a polymath. If I was, I'd be on Jeopardy, right? So I mean, yes, but Brother Dwayne, I'll put Westside Mike's comment up once again.
I mean, that I agree with that to a certain degree. I think, some people in the community do deserve a second chance. I think, one of the great things about the Nation of Islam, and this is an organization I've been fairly critical of, but I can acknowledge that they've done some great things in the community. I think one of the great things that they've done is the program of rehabilitation. And John Henry Clark spoke about how brothers and sisters in the community who had lost a sense of self, a sense of identity. The Nation of Islam, reached them. These are brothers and sisters who didn't have anywhere else to go didn't have anywhere else to turn to or anywhere else to look for hope. And he said, joining the Nation of Islam gave these brothers and sisters a new sense of manhood, a new sense of sisterhood, a new sense of identity, a sense of confidence in themselves. So I think that's one of the great things that the Nation of Islam was able to do. As an organization that did give people a second chance, that did rehabilitate people. But I think we have to be very careful of that. We do have to understand that there's certain people you're not going to be able to save. And the Nation of Islam, incidentally, is also an example of this, that, there were some people who came into the Nation of Islam who really were, rehabilitated, really accepted the teachings of the Nation of Islam, the vision of the Nation of Islam. There were a lot of people who were criminals outside of the Nation of Islam that became criminals inside the Nation of Islam. And this is the point that Malcolm himself, spoke about. Malcolm spoke about how the Nation of Islam became a criminal organization. So what I would say is I think we do have to be very careful, in engaging in that approach. And I think, we do, have to give people in the community a second chance, and we do have to, go into the community and try to, help people, try to, build people up in the community. But I think we also need to be very cautious and recognize that there are certain people who, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to save. We're not going to be able to save everybody. I think, we have to balance those two tendencies.
Very good. Very good.
If I may say a reference to that, but our community needs like rehabilitation overall.
Yeah.
We need an overall.
Yeah.
We need a whole overall.
And Brother Westside Mike says, of course, some people can't or don't want to be saved. I'm talking about making sure we give all our people the opportunity to want it. And I think everyone can agree with that. If they don't want it, so be it. I know Brother Westside Mike, we still got to get a workout in. We ducking and dodging each other, but it's cool. We like two A-level fighters who's trying to build up the fight, brother. You know what I'm saying? But we're going to get that workout in. But I would agree. I know Brother Westside Mike, he's done some work in the community. He knows me personally, the work I've done. So we're big on that. We got to at least give our people the opportunity. Now, if you reject it, that's on you. But we have to be out there and be willing to get the opportunity. And, Brother Barana said, you're too old. But one of the things I do in the gym, luckily for me, I've worked out enough to where I have a figure that draws attention. And so as a result, oftentimes at the gym, there are a lot of younger brothers who kind of look up to you because, you're kind of what they consider buff, or you can lift a lot of weights. And so there was a brother from the Congo, and he always calls me Lumumba because he's from the Congo. He said, brother, when you're giving these brothers tutorials on how to lift correctly, you need to also be dropping some knowledge. And I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. So there was a situation where we were doing a chest workout, and the brother said, come on with my N-word. I said, hey, don't call me that. In fact, I got up from the bench and said, tell me what the word means. He froze. Well, I don't do dabba-dabba-do. I said, so why are you using a word you don't know what it means? Well, that's something that they used to call us back in the day, the white folk. I said, so why are you calling me that? Guess what? He don't use the word around me anymore. So we talk about that hip hop tradition of a cipher. We're going to destroy ignorance and build on knowledge. I take that rather seriously, and I think that's an example. I'm quite sure, Brother Westside Mike does the same thing. Oftentimes we'll find ourselves in the gym where and there's some bravado, and there may be some toxic masculinity that's going on there, and we use that opportunity to say, hey, how about you take that energy, put it into the weight? So take that energy to do something constructive. Or I hit him with the big one. Would you be acting like that if it was a white person? Huh? Let me ask you this. Let's just keep it a buck. If it was a white person being disrespectful, would you be that quick to fight them? Now, we all know what the answer is for me, right? But we're not going to get into that. We're talking about YOU.
But the N-word starting to pop up in Afro beats and the Caribbean music, reggae music. And I'm like, yeah, that's not even, why is it popping off? I'm here vibing to the word, and they try to use the N-word.
Right. Right. Brother Westside Mike says, I always tell people, I'm not your N-word, I'm your brother. If I'm absolutely, I said, you call me brother, homie, but don't call me that. Right? So absolutely, I'm with that 100%. So, when we at the gym, I'm working out my body, but I also want to work out my mind and into my soul as well. So definitely, we're going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but I think it's a good conversation when we're having a semi-structured conversations. It grows organically. And I think all of these things are interconnected to why politicians are unwilling to admit that America is a racist country. And I think it's on us. Malcolm would always mention sometimes it's our fault because we aren't willing to be honest, right? And I think one of the issues that we tend to find is a lot of our people are not willing to be honest. And Sister Michelle, I think you speak to, a lot of times it's because of economic issues. I don't want to lose my job. Right. And but I think, we see this from politicians that there's a way that you can articulate your perspective in a manner that is digestible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. And of course, professional. And I think that's why, one of my students said, well, how do I develop a robust vocabulary such as your own? I said, you need to read, and you need to read literature that's going to challenge and expand your vocabulary. Right.
And also, may I make a suggestion for your channel? We don't have to do it now. Can you just maybe once every quarter just have like a open panel meeting where we can discuss possible topics, where we want to go, where we want to have private group, just see, so how we can, I'm not sure how you want to get an app. We can, do our thing. Who knows? Maybe one day.
I might even be drinking some wine on one of them. Okay, I think we could do that. And one of the things here Lumumba speaks is, we always bet on Black, and that's just not a slogan, but I truly believe that everything that we need is in our own community. Right? There was a time in my life where I was going through some things. I was in and out of jail, and I was at a state to where I found myself truly lacking self-control. Right? And so I was in and out of jail. I spent maybe the better part of a year inside behind a wall, as they say. And so I got out. And I met with a sister who, of course, was a therapist, African centered, so on and so forth. And so she had me on this program. And I remember one of the things that I had that was covered was this concept of all that you need is within you now. Right? Don't look outside of yourself for the solutions that you're seeking. Right? And I take that same perspective in terms of when we're looking at, doing work in the Black community, addressing issues in the Black community. We don't have to look outside ourselves to, of course, solve the problems that we have. And so if you agree with that we don't have to look outside the Black community, put a 1 in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if you agree with that. I definitely want to, hear what people have to say regarding that. But do you all think that the solution to our problems are internal rather than external? Put a 1 in the chat if you agree with that.
I completely agree with that. I completely agree that the solution to our problems is an internal one. However, we know, Brother Lumumba and I, whether we want to admit this or not, we come from a tradition where, Jesus paid it all. So Jesus is gonna come back one day and solve all our problems. And the devil, as the devil create the problems, and Jesus is going to solve the problems. So all these things are external. The problem is the external one, and the solution is the external one. So how do you solve that psychosis going on in the minds of many of our people, because they really believe that Jesus will solve their problems because he paid it all on the cross. So if I want to find a solution, I just need to go to the cross for the solution. I don't know how to remedy that kind of psychosis in the minds of our people. I don't know how to do it. Maybe a better teacher than I could do that, because if I could come up with a solvable solution to say, hey, all your solutions to yourself, the problems, all the things, the advantages that you seek is within you. Go deep, go inside yourself. And they'll say, who, me? Shoot, I need to go to the Bishop, Reverend, Dr. So it's like we believe the outside is gonna be the remedy to our problems, and we also believe that the outside is creating the problems that persist within our community. The devil made me do it, so I don't know how to solve that. I don't.
Well, so I think that there's a couple things there. Real quick, Westside Mike, but the Westside Mike talking about Michigan. He means Michigan. He trying to talk, but he know it's O State all day, every day. And we're gonna smash y'all November 30th, 2024. You better believe that. We could put something on it. So I think there's a couple things. If you're seeking to disabuse Black people of their beliefs in Abrahamic faiths, I think number one, you're gonna have to be very gentle in the way you broach the subject, right? Number two, I would argue you're gonna have to quarrel with them. You're gonna give them some baby food before you give them the steak and of course some potatoes, and you're gonna have to see if they are even willing to educate themselves outside of what the doctrine or dogma that they're being taught at these religious institutions. If they are unwilling, you might as well just back off, right? But if they are willing, you have to feed them, but you need to feed them with actual information that could be substantiated. And I'll push students to read, right? And read scholarly material, peer-reviewed material, because we know anyone could just write a book. Tariq Nasheed would be a good example of that. He'll just write some shit, put it in the book, and then put it out there for public dissemination, and then make a lot of money off of it and say, see, follow me, look at me. So I think there's a couple ways you could go about doing that. One manner, and this is a conversation I had with a brother at the gym. He was telling me that he was going to a church to play basketball. So I said, well, that's odd. I didn't know churches had just Navy gyms. Well, most churches don't. And so he stated that they were doing Bible study. I said, okay, I see they're trying to proselytize. And I said, well, so why are you going to Bible study at the church? And he said, well, I want to learn about the history of the Christian religion. So I said, well, brother, I'm going to be honest with you. If you want to learn about the history of the religion, what you're going to need to do is go to college and take a course on the history of the religion. Because when you go to Bible study, they're simply going to read a couple scriptures, give you their interpretation, right, of the scripture, and then you're supposed to believe what they're telling you. And there's another brother who was an actual Christian who said, hey, he's right. If you want to learn about the history of religion, you're going to need to go to a university, not Bible study. Because I said most of the individuals who are promoting the religion, they don't even know the history of the religion, if you want to keep it a buck, right? So something to be cognizant of. Sister Shai says, I agree mostly. I think everything has to have a balance. Can a friend not help you with something that you may need? Or maybe I'm not catching on, Lumumba, sorry. Yeah, but I would give you that. Yeah, people can help you. But I think it's important that we look internally, right? And the reason why I say that is oftentimes, and Malcolm gave this example in terms of the self-hatred, that what tends to happen in our community, he said particularly self-hatred, is once you actually capitulate to hating yourself and hating your where you come from, your African origins, we find ourselves in a situation where we start looking for others to do for us rather than us doing for ourselves. And if you know anything about critical race theory, one of the key themes of critical race theory is interest convergence, meaning most of the time when someone's doing something for you, guess what? It actually benefits them in the long run. We saw this with college football, the integration of college sport athletics. The other issue of a true friend may help you, but they're also trying to get you on your feet to where you can help yourself. Because a true friend doesn't want you to be someone who's dependent. So something to consider being cognizant of there as well. And anyone on the panel have any thoughts on that? And Brother Westside Mike says Bible study is the wrong path for the history of the Christian religion.
But also maybe he needs a socialization. Church provides a form of socialization, a form of network people may not otherwise have.
This is true, but I would argue it's a negative socialization.
Okay, but where is a safe forum where a person can go to congregate and network with people? I guess I understand the concern with the religious.
Let me answer your question. Well, there are a couple of places. One is the gym, community centers, rec centers, etc. But I would argue that the religious institutions aren't safe places to actually network, so on and so forth. I mean, there are a number of cases coming out in public light of not only physical abuse, sexual abuse by ministers, by the clergy, against members of the actual church community, parishioners. But Westside Mike mentioned the Urban League, right? Most urban leagues in metropolitan areas have actual Black professional organizations where you could get together, so on and so forth. But I would argue, and we don't even have to talk about, the pedophilia being rampant in religious institutions, right? So I would argue, if you want to look at things from an actual objective standpoint, that a religious institution, particularly a church, mosque, synagogue, etc., is not a safe place for a person to be, particularly if they're a child or someone who is in need or in a vulnerable situation.
Or someone's wife, because the pastor really he's trying to get it in. But I would say to a library, go to a library or an organization of your choice, whatever hobby you have an interest in.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some kind of
International.
Absolutely. Toastmasters is a very good one. There's many different kinds of organizations out there. If you involve yourself, you could socialize with people who have your similar interests, rather than just random people from off of the street. So I would suggest these institutions and organizations, consider them as well.
Okay, so the Lumber Speaks, you're developing your own infrastructure here right now.
Yes, ma'am.
So for socialization event, we're here.
Absolutely. And Sister Shy says, they don't follow the Bible. Well, I would argue, sister, if people actually read the Bible, that's a good thing. You should want people not to follow the Bible. If you actually read the scriptures and what it advocates, you'll be glad people aren't following it. So that's a conversation maybe for another day. Yeah. But I would argue you may want to be happy that people are not following the Bible. Yeah.
I think that what happens is when we brother and when we have these kinds of conversations, people don't understand, because what I would say is this: to get a better grasp of where I'm coming from is listening to people like Dr. Ray Higgins. He's a person who was once a Bible historian, a Bible person, but he is able to explain what we are referencing in a different way. So it wouldn't come across as evil, because to a Christian ear, it would sound like what we're saying is blasphemous.
Mm-hmm.
Blasphemous. So I would suggest, starting with people who are scholarly, who have been able to break down certain things in a way that a regular person on the street would be able to understand without doing all the reading, because the reading is already done for you. So I would just do some research, look up Dr. Ray Higgins, and see where we're coming from.
He's out of St. Louis, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. But like Michelle was saying, this is a forum as well, because you could interact with like-minded people. You could always talk to Dr. Lamoma offline or Dwayne if they want to forward your number, and y'all could get. Let me stop playing.
No, but this is a good point, because when we talk about networking, when I got with Brother Dwayne, we had some conversations offline. Sometimes I think I call him too much, right? But like I said, he's my big brother ideologically. But he said, "Listen, man, you're a PhD candidate. You've done a lot of writing in your academic career. Why don't you take those writings and use them to your benefit by, editing them and posting them on Medium?" So I never thought about that. Thank you so much. Right, and so when you create an account on Medium and you write, you make residual income. Right. Excuse me. So, like I said, this is a space where we're able to do that. And so that's why when I tell people, like, this brother is truly my ideological big brother, he's my favorite historian's favorite historian, I mean that. Right. So this is one of the ways we build, and we build organically. And like I said, the brother told me he was a Pan-Africanist. Of course, I'm a Pan-Africanist. It's given red, black, and green all day. He's from Guyana. We've never even met in person before. And when we just started building, I think he was able to see this brother is actually a serious Pan-Africanist. He's not someone who says he's a Pan-Africanist and isn't. I saw that with him. And I started reaching out to him, asking questions, gaining a more robust knowledge, right, on African and Caribbean history. And before you know it, I said, "Hey, man, I'm dealing with these issues. What do you think I should do? How should I address this situation?" Right? And as a matter of fact, I used one of his articles on Medium. I signed it for my class to read. It was on the syllabus. So this is how we build. This is how we build it. And when I say, all that we need is within us is within the community. We don't have to look outside the community for what we need.
when you drop them books, just remember y'all could just reference these other books. When you reference and stuff, reference that Amazon. Dwayne have like 100 books, so just reference him, and they could just click the link and just I get access to his books if they need need be, and the same way when Brother Lamoma starts writing his books, because Dwayne I think is a he writes on Medium as well. So I mean, if he reference you, he could just put a link up there to your books as well. You know what I mean? So you have to run a monopoly on the board,
Here's the thing. I started writing on Medium. He said, I'm going to write an article directing people to some of the articles you wrote. Last week, I did the same thing. I said, listen, it's called reciprocity. Turnabout is fair play. Right? So, I mean, when you're in that mindset that you're really trying to help your people, it's almost like second nature. I remember there was a time when somebody was asking me, hey, this is back when I was still living in Dayton. And I was like, man, I need a trainer. I'm like, I'm too busy to train you, but I gave people but a Westside Mike's number. I said, he'll get you right. Right. So when you're in that mindset, it becomes second nature. Sister Shy says, I think there's some good things in the Bible, in my opinion. I'm not a Christian, though. I could understand that, sister. I mean, I think you can find positives in every world religion. Right. So I'm not, disavowing it. That is a fact. But I would just argue in totality, what we tend to find happen, and part of this is rooted in the master narrative of Christianity. And I actually remember when I was minoring in religion in undergrad, the professor kept saying this: most people choose to accentuate certain aspects of the Bible, certain narratives, rather than others, right? And we know this is done for a number of reasons, particularly to proselytize, but just something to be knowledgeable of. But a D1 Beats. You're here. Tap in if you want to be part of the conversation, brother. The link is in the chat, higher up in the chat, but I could put the link in the chat right below your comment. Want to know what you have to say about, of course, the conversation.
Yeah, there's good things in the Bible. There's also good things in Hans Christian Andersen, Little Red Robin Hood. Don't eat someone else's porridge. Don't sleep in someone else's bed. I mean, there's good things in any literature that you want to find good things in. But I'm saying that don't take it on like these is historical things, and you need to reference these things in terms of your daily. Well, let me leave that alone. Let me leave the biblical conversation alone.
And so you know what? I think what I do is I'm gonna do a show on that. I did a show I think last year or 2 years ago on should the Bible should the Black community divest from spookism? And I was talking about religion in general, but I think I would do one on the Bible, and maybe it'd be titled "Should Black people actually follow the teachings of the Bible? Should Black people follow the teachings of the Bible?" Something like that. And then we could, of course, have that conversation. And of course, maybe go over some scriptures or something.
Are you on Twitter? Are you going to get an X account so we can have chats there?
I am on Twitter. I am on Twitter.
Are you going to strictly, what direction you're going to take this channel? How are you going to develop it? Are you going to share with? I mean, not necessarily have to share with us, but.
Well, yeah, I think I can expand the channel. I just need to make sure that I get back to streaming and producing content consistently, right? I mean, this is my first video, I think, since October, right? And so I need to get back to streaming and producing content consistently, and then of course the channel will grow the way it should. And at one point I was out doing daily Black History facts every morning, so I need to get back to
I used to get those.
Doing my daily Black History facts. I need to get back to my Kuja Shakalia self-determination.
Maybe once a week, so it's not too much pressure.
Right. Well, the issue is, and I can just be honest, because this is family, I've been doing a lot of writing, the dissertation, running around and stuff. So it kind of got to the point where there were times where I was going to bed 2:30 in the morning. And then, at my advanced age, it's hard for me to get up at 6:30.
You're almost 40, but you're not 40 yet.
Well, actually, we're going to leave it alone. But what the issue is, I don't have as much energy in the morning like I used to when I was in my 20s to just get up and I'm jumping. But Brother Westside Mike says, what's your opinion on Hebrew Israelites? This is a great question. I don't know if I told you this, Brother Westside Mike. My brother is an actual Hebrew Israelite. Lord have mercy, right? Well, in my opinion, of course, I actually have read some scholarly literature on Hebrew Israelites. It's another form of self-abnegation. They're seeking to disavow and this, of course, associate themselves with Africa and African identity, right? We know there are a number of Black people done this in terms of arguing that they're indigenous to America, arguing that they're Moors, even though being a Moor, the Moroccan nation is in Africa. Then, of course, the same with Hebrew Israelites. These are individuals who believe that they are actually the people that are mentioned in the Bible. I would argue that if you've actually read the Bible and the story of the Israelite people in the Bible, I don't know how anyone would want to identify as though that group of people. And of course, I'm not original in this position. Of course, this is something that, of course, I'm the talking point of Brother Dwayne Omawale. But I just think it's nonsensical to me. But I do have some scholarly literature on the Hebrew Israelites. Let me see if I can find it real quick, family. And I can share that with you all. I don't think I'm going to be able to rather quickly. But golly, I used to have it up here somewhere on the Hebrew Israelites. Yeah, I might have to find it again. Once again, as I would say, every time I need to find the book, I can't find it, right, when we're live. But just something to be cognizant of, but they have an extremely anti-African disposition. I don't know if anyone's ever seen some of the videos online. I saw a video when they were in New York City where there was a young man, he was probably 13 or 14 years old. He was from actually Mali, right? And the young man, they said, well, where you from? And they was like, brother, did you know you're Israelite? You know, you're not an African American. He said, well, actually, I'm from Africa. He said, my father is from Mali. My mother's from Togo. And he said, oh, they yelled at him, so, oh, you're the enemy, right? The second issue is we've seen videos or social media posts where they've actually taken drawings of the transatlantic slave trade and posted, see, these are African people selling Hebrew Israelites, right? Just completely nonsensical, ahistorical. And I would take the issue that anyone that seeks to falsify African history is an enemy of African people, right? We tend to take the position that because the person looks like us, then maybe that means they're not an enemy. But I tell them that anyone who would do that, it doesn't matter if they're white supremacists, Arab nationalists, members of the alphabet community, or even a religious community, if you're seeking to falsify African history for any reason, you are an enemy of African people. Does anyone else want to share their?
I just want to say thanks for allowing me to join in. I'm going to be hopping off soon. So when should I expect the next notification so I'm more prepared? Because I kind of was just like, hello?
You muted, Professor, Brother Lumumba. You muted. Dwayne, tell him he's muted.
Yeah, it's still muted. Lumumba.
I'm still muted. Yes,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. Yes, I said that I think I'll do another video on Sunday.
Okay, Sunday, what time?
I think maybe noon. Noon will probably be.
I'm in DC, so you're an hour behind me, right?
No. I'm on East Coast time as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Ohio, OHIO, we're on East Coast time as well. Absolutely. So
okay.
I'm looking for the book that I actually bought, and I actually bought this book like back in 2017, and read it in its entirety. So matter of fact, but Brother Dwayne, how about you share your comments regarding
the Hebrew
Israelites? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's rooted in a sense of self-hatred, and you mentioned the comment that was made that if you actually read the Bible, the Old Testament, which is the story of the Hebrew people, why would you want to identify with these people? When you actually read that book, it does not provide a flattering image of who the Hebrew Israelites were. It actually depicts them as very, very very ungrateful. These are supposed to be God's chosen people, yet every opportunity they get in the Bible, they're always leaving the worship of Yahweh to worship false gods, false idols, just very sinful people. Private, we had a conversation about King David. King David was the Israelite king who was appointed by God. The man God selected to be king, and he was the type of man who not only committed adultery, but then murdered the husband of the wife that he was committing adultery with, so that he could take the woman for himself. And this is the man who was appointed by God. So I'll make that comment about the Hebrew Israelites, that when you actually really study the history of who the Hebrew Israelites were, why would you even want to identify with these people? And I know part of it is rooted in this romantic notion that the Hebrew Israelites are God's chosen people. But, again, that's why I'm always an advocate for, I wish Black people who are religious would actually read the Bible and really understand what it is, that they're embracing.
Absolutely. And we talk about King David. This is the man who's considered after God's own heart, right? This is the same individual that, according to the religious script, the biblical scripture, when he died, they had a prepubescent young lady sleep in the bed with him naked to keep his body warm. And according to the biblical scripture, he did not sleep with her. He did not know her, meaning he did not have sexual relations with her, conjugal relations with her, simply because he didn't have the physical strength or energy to do so. So this is something that once again to be cognizant of. And also, Brother D1 Beats, when you asked the question, the name of the book. So I purchased this book on Amazon back in 2017. This is a scholarly book, Chosen People: The Rise of American Black Israelite Religions, and by Jacob S. Dorman. So that's the text. It's an authoritative text, a scholarly text, an objective text that, if you want to get a introspective look at the Hebrew Israelite faith from an objective standpoint, not in which someone is trying to proselytize you, that would be your ability to do so, right? That I have the book. I don't know where it is, but I've read the book in its entirety. And it actually starts off in the 1800s, where there was a brother, and I used to call him Brother loosely, who had a vision while he was cutting grass in Oklahoma that from reading the Bible, that the people who read about the Bible. So, most Black people identify with the story of Jewish people in the Bible and slavery, even though we know the story is ahistorical, as a form of fighting for liberation. And then he said, "Oh, I'm not just identifying with these people." He said, "We are these people," right? And so that in itself is problematic, because the entire story of Jewish people and their creation is mythological, right? Even Jewish scholars have argued that, according to the biblical text, that the patriarch of the Jewish people, Abraham, is a mythological figure that never actually existed in human history. And to back that up, I can't find the book here. That the book is The Bible Unearthed, the archaeologically new vision of ancient Israel and the origins of its sacred text. And so Jewish scholars now routinely have even shared that the story of the Exodus and the origin story of Jewish people in the Torah, the Pentateuch, and of course the Bible is ahistorical and mythological in nature. So this isn't a situation where we're promoting this type of narrative rooted in anti-Semitism or anti-Zionist or anti-Jewish type of rhetoric. This is simply from an academic and from a historical standpoint. And I think for most people who, of course, are proud of their history, heritage, and culture, I think a Black person, a person of Black descent, would take extreme umbrage with a religious text that, of course, characterizes the preeminent called civilization and during antiquity, African civilization and antiquity, as being what rather, the term I would like to use, heroistic and, of course, evil in nature, right? And we're talking about ancient Egypt. So there are a number of things that we can unpack there, and maybe we can do that. I'll do a show maybe on Sunday where we talk about unpacking anti-Blackness in Abrahamic religions. And in fact, I think that is the show that we would do. But yes, Brother D1, I just wanted to make sure I was able to give you the title of that book, and of course, The Chosen People, unpacking the history of Hebrew Israelite faith, so in the African American community. So any final thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, it's interesting how the Hebrew Israelites seem to demonize everything and anything of an African nature. Even the gods, like you were suggesting earlier.
Yes, sir.
The golden calf. I think it was Hathor. The African god Hathor. They just demonize everything African. I think it's a very, very funny thing. But what I would say is the question I have, and I guess I couldn't ask it tonight, is the next time we come on, maybe we could have a political discussion on Tim Scott. And how Tim Scott,
okay,
the politician. Yeah, and how he endorsed Donald Trump. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Oh, yes, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that when we have time, maybe we could address that particular thing. But that's really it. Brother Lumumba, Brother Dwayne, I appreciate you guys giving me some time on this panel to express myself. And until Sunday, I guess. All right?
Yes, and very quickly, I just put the link to Brother Dwayne Omawale's Medium page in the link in the chat as well. So make sure you follow Brother Dwayne on Medium as well as myself. And so we want to make sure we do that. Brother Westside Mike says they say they're separate from Africans. At the same time, Africans that sold us into slavery aren't related to us, the Jamaicans or Haitians. You're absolutely right. So matter of fact, one of my cousins who in Columbus, he said he was having a conversation with a Hebrew Israelite, and the guy was saying, well, basically you could tell if a person is, a Hebrew Israelite based on their spirit. So and it was a young Filipino man walking down the street, and he looked like he was homeless. He said, well, he's Filipino, he's not black. And they expanded it to saying, well, anyone who was non-white was Hebrew Israelite. So we see that even the concept based of their identity, the basis of who they are, changes based on what really you can argue whatever is convenient. So very murky. A number of issues. I remember I was in Cincinnati once doing some work, and there was a brother stating that, so he basically, I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah. I said, I've been around the country, and every time I meet you brothers, you all seem to be destitute, extremely poor. And he said, well, this was ordained by God. And if anyone is familiar with the Bible, God would say that if you don't serve me, I will punish you. And one of the punishments will be that you'll be poor, destitute, a vagabond, so on and so forth. And so I said, well, why would I want to believe? Why would I, have a belief system or endorse or practice a belief system in which I lack agency of self-determination? That's fatalistic. This is a belief system that's fatalistic in nature, right? So I was like, it's completely nonsensical, and he was stunned that I was even able to provide that type of retort. So once again, these are some of the issues that we find ourselves combating with the level of anti-intellectualism in our community. And as I always argue, people who are intellectually indolent are easily manipulated, and typically they manipulate against their own best interest. Any thoughts from you, Brother Dwayne?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. That's a huge problem in the community, but particularly when we talk about certain religious spaces, and we've had these conversations a lot about brothers and sisters who are religious, but have never actually read the religious text of the religions that they claim to follow. And with the Hebrew Israelites, that's something I noticed a lot, because the thing is, you can't read the Bible and then come to the conclusion that African people are the Hebrew Israelites. The Bible specifically actually says that's not the case. And there's one aspect of the Bible that a lot of people may not be aware of, but Moses, according to the Bible, was actually married to a Cushite woman, an African woman. And the Hebrews were adamantly against that, because one of the things that God commands the Hebrews to do in the Bible is to not marry outside of their race,
right?
Outside of the culture. So if Moses is married to an African woman and the Hebrews have a problem with that, what does it say about who the Hebrews were?
Right. That means that they're not African, right?
Yeah. So, but that's in the book. So that's what I mean. The only way you could be a Hebrew Israelite and really believe that is if you've never actually read that book.
Absolutely. And I've even read some versions of the Bible where it stated, yes, Moses was married to a woman who was Ethiopian, but in the Bible it said, but that doesn't mean she was black.
Oh, you see, I've never come across that.
It was a study Bible, because one of my friends is a bishop. And I was like, what, in the French toast? I'm like, so she's Ethiopian, but she ain't black.
And mind you, he was from Egypt, so most likely he would have met her while he was in Africa.
Right. So yeah, it's truly something. And we're not trying to just poo-poo religion. I mean, like, I'm an atheist, but I don't think Brother Dwayne is. But it's just
the funny thing is I'm not. And I mean, we have these conversations where I'm a bit softer on Abrahamic religion than you are, because I organize in a community of brothers and sisters who are Christian and Muslim. I do have a lot of respect, for them and for their religious beliefs. So I'm not, my personal view in it, I'm not the type of person who would try to discourage somebody from practicing Abrahamic religion. But I would always say, please actually read the Bible, read the Quran, know what it is that you're practicing.
In fact, yes, I have the Quran right here. So, and I stole one of your quotes once again, when I was at the gym, and the brother said, well, have you read the Quran? I said, yes, I have a copy in my home. He said, so if you read the Quran, why aren't you a Muslim? I said, because I read the Quran. Right. So, once again, I'll be quoting you all the time, brother, all the time. So just, then, something to be, cognizant of, but, It's one of those things, sadly. But and a lot of that I would argue just rooted in intellectual indolence. Unwilling to actually engage literature. They say all the time that if you want to hide something from a Black person, unfortunately, you put it in a book. And so, we really want to push back against that. Something I would always push with my children, my watoto, was to be avid readers. And I can recall that when I had them for a very large amount of time when they were younger, it was a norm. They would go into the barbershop, sit down and pick up a magazine and start reading. And so it became a norm. Of course, my son was a huge advocate. And then, of course, his sister would follow. But of course, things changed when they got older, became teenagers, and of course, I wasn't able to see them as much. But I just believe it's extremely important. And I think when you're doing work in the community, particularly the type of work in the community in areas that most people don't want to go to, what we tend to find, and I can say this because unfortunately, I did spend, a segment of my life when I was much younger behind the wall, as being ensnared by the carceral state, that there is a very high level of lack of intellectualism, of critical thinking, of actually intelligence, right? And you're sitting there talking about it's like, dang, like this dude's thinking is on the level. I remember, I think I was like 26, and I was in jail, and there was a brother who was like 47 years old, but the way he acted, I thought he was a teenager, right? And that's rooted in what? There's this lack of intelligence. Not, so we talk about oftentimes in our community, we are grooming people to be athletes. But we could grooming people to be ministers and pastors. I was at one point, my parents were grooming me to be a minister, right? Hallelujah. Lord have mercy, right? But we also need to groom our brothers and sisters, not only just to be academics for academic sake, but to be intellectuals, to be critical thinkers, right? And so that's one of the things that I hope that we can promote on this show, on my channel, and that, of course, is something that we could disseminate to the community in general, abroad, and the entire African community. And I believe if we do that, I think that can help to challenge, and scuttle many of the issues that we find that people, falling for. But one of the examples I give for my students is that, I started off at St. Clair Community College and I had a 0.6 GPA at the two terms. And I had to learn, one, how to be a student, and two, I had to learn to not be intellectually lazy. This is not high school. Right. And so, I got that, that red badge of courage, and it was able to help me along the way in terms of me matriculating in my life. But I'm just a huge advocate, for promoting critical thinking. And Malcolm would even talk about this, that he realized how much he had fallen off the path his father had put him on when he became an avid reader, when he was able to think critically and intelligently. And I would always argue that one of the reasons why I am an acolyte of Malcolm X as opposed to Dr. King was Malcolm X was intelligent enough to understand the nature and the full effect of white supremacy very on in his activist career, rather than Dr. King, who realized these things very late in his career in life.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I would argue he was beginning to realize it, but I don't know to what extent he fully, was really able to grasp the extent of it.
Right.
Because I mean, it's become a very famous, statement by King now. That the statement about how I fear I've integrated my people into a burning house.
Right.
The part that a lot of people leave out or don't seem to know about is what followed next was his statement about how Black people need to become firemen and put the fire out and save the burning house.
Yeah. So then it's like, well, dude, like, what are we talking about here, right? So that's a great point. We don't know, but like I said, for me, it's Malcolm. That's one of the reasons. But I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
You're always welcome here at Lumumba Speaks. Everyone who's watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. We're back. We're going to be consistent. We want you back in the. We want to break the algorithm. Appreciate you all for tapping in. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace.